Okay, well, there's a few people here. We've got, the people are starting to come in now, like 15, 16, 17, good. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this. This is the first in our spring sessions. We want to thank you all for taking the time to be with us today, taking some time out of your busy teaching schedules. We're excited about today because we're planning on doing something a little bit different. There have been a lot of webinars at the moment, which are great. It's really good for teachers to be able to touch base with the authors, ask them questions, get kind of expert advice and tips, especially with the kind of whole move to online learning. I think a lot of that's been very valuable. But for some of us, we think that we can take that a little bit further. Webinars are good. We'll certainly continue to do them. But we'd also like to do some of the things that we miss. Remember back in the day, we would get together and we would do, workshop style activities and events. And we kind of missed that. So we thought, how can we replicate that in a webinar format? It's not that easy. But we thought the best way to do it would be to have a more interactive session, a more collaborative session, almost like a giant kind of brainstorming session. And we thought we'd do it as a panel to make it a bit more informal as well, a little less kind of input from us, the publisher, or I don't want to say the word experts because guys, they're smiling in the background. I'm not sure we would call ourselves that, but yeah, so we want to do something a bit more interactive, a little bit more collaborative, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. And we know that you guys quite often still have questions that don't always get answered in the webinars. The webinars, the topics tend to be focused around, 21st century skills, all of these kinds of things. We have one later this week, which you can certainly register for. But we know people still have a lot of questions around some of the core elements of teaching and learning. So we wanted to make sure we still cover those bases and make sure that we give you as much support as possible in terms of the core skills. So that's what we're going to focus on today. If you can see our images up in the top right-hand corner, I am being joined on the panel this morning. Aala, how are you?
I'm great.
Good morning.
Good morning to you guys. Good morning to everyone who's just joined. We're so excited to have you here today, and I'm definitely excited to answer some of these tough questions that you might have. So yeah, fire away.
Excellent. So Aala's joining us from Macmillan Education in Egypt. And we also have Mohammed up in the left corner.
Hi, Nathan. Hi, everyone. Hi, Aala. It's good to see you here. And thanks for this idea. Actually, it's a very creative idea for everyone to share their experience and to handle and tackle some points in terms of teaching different language skills. It's good to see everybody here across the MENA.
Thanks, Mohammed. And we're happy to have both of you here today. So as you can see, I've put the advert on the screen to introduce us. We do have this session being repeated this evening. So obviously you're here now, so you're probably not going to want to watch it twice. But if you've got colleagues who were not able to join this morning because of their teaching schedules, you can let them know that they can still register for this evening's session, and we'll be repeating this then. Okay, so we are going to be talking today about the skills, speaking, listening, reading, writing, and viewing. Now, we all know that there are lots of approaches. If you're teaching in a young learner context, you're probably doing integrated skills. If you're teaching young adults, maybe in an academic setting, you might be doing paired skills. And if you're teaching adults, you might even be doing individual skills. Some of that can be quite targeted. So you could be doing business English, focusing on business communication, or you could be doing just a writing course, for example. So there's going to be a lot of people in the room who have got a variety of experience and a variety of different teaching contexts. So we can look at some of those things as well. The first question you might have, no one's popping up with any questions yet, but you can feel free to add your questions to the chat box. I've turned on Q&A mode. You can either write them in the public section, or you can actually put them in the Q&A part of the chat box, and we will look at them one by one. That's fine, but we also want your input as well. So we'll ask the questions, we'll discuss it amongst ourselves, And then if you have any comments, you can certainly add them as well. We hope you've got lots of questions for us. Sorry, I was going to have one question then. That was going to be your first question might be, there used to be only 4 skills. There certainly was when I did my CELTA. So what is this 5th skill and where did it come from and who made it up? So we'll cover that as well a little bit later. In terms of the structure and the method of the session, I thought there are 5 skills. We've got about an hour. So we've got approximately 10 minutes per skill, I guess. And our aim is to look at perhaps more generally, but also specifically challenges related to MENA and MENA students. I think that's quite important that we look at it, not just, how do we teach listening, but, what kinds of challenges do students here in MENA face and what kind of tips do we all have to overcome some of those challenges. I think that's quite important. Our aim throughout is to kind of build a collaborative board, like a notice board, tips and advice. We're going to be using Padlet for that. I'm going to share that on the next screen. And at the end, once we've finished, we can then send you your certificate for attendance. And we'll also share you a download of the Padlet activity as well. So you can keep this tips board for the future. Any questions before we get going? Any questions from the panel? No, you guys are good? Perfect.
Great.
Okay, good. Aala's with us. Excellent. Good morning, Aala.
She's there.
Hope you're well in Egypt as well. Excellent.
Hi, Aala.
Okay, so give me a second. I'm going to share the Padlet so we can keep an eye on what we're doing. Application window. Okay, good. So everybody should see this Padlet with the 5 skills. Yep, everyone can see this? Perfect. Okay, good. I put a couple in at the very beginning just to kind of give an example of some of the things that we might want to fill in along the way. But as we're talking, we'll fill it in together. Yep. Okay, good. So while we give people, because people are still joining as we go, while we give people a little bit of time to think of some questions, sometimes it takes a little while for them to emerge. Let's move first to listening. And I'm going to open up to our panel and ask them the question, in your experience, what challenges do students here in MENA face in regards to listening as a skill, learning it? And do you have any tips to overcome this? Now, this could be in a physical classroom or an online classroom. We can tackle both because I know that there's a range of teaching situations going on at the moment. And that's a bit fluid as well. Some people may be going back and forwards between online and the physical classroom. We are gender neutral, so who would like to go first?
I could start. Ladies first, yeah? So I think one of the major challenges that teachers, specifically in Egypt, face with listening as a skill is the fact that our students do not get enough opportunities to be exposed to the language. And they might be exposed to a specific accent, but not all accents. So once, let's say, they grow up listening to people speaking in American English, and then they go to school, and teachers are speaking in a British accent. So sometimes it's a little bit hard for students to understand what teachers are saying or some of the vocabulary used. That's one of the challenges. So the different accents and dialects in general. And I think when we talk about young learners, I always tell teachers that it doesn't matter, like you do not need to expose your students to all the accents out there, and maybe go for international English instead of focusing on different accents. So once your students are exposed to American English, that's basically, that's totally fine. You do not need to also expose them to British English. And later on, when they grow up, they will have enough exposure to the different accents. So yeah, that's one of the challenges that people face in Egypt. And I think the majority of students are more familiar with the American accent than the British accent, basically because of the media and movies and, so yeah, that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, I would add to that. I think that I've heard this before, is that people say, this is a very famous comment, is that I can understand when my teacher is speaking, but then when I leave the classroom and somebody speaks to me in English, I don't know what they're saying. That fear, right? So good point. I've made a note of this one, so we can add this. Accents, perfect. So do you think that course books are moving more towards international English because of that?
Yeah, I think that because it's easier for everyone. I mean, students and teachers alike to go for an international accent instead of going for a specific accent, because at the end of the day, students will need to deal with people who speak the language, who come from different countries, and each country has its own accent. So it makes more sense. It makes their lives easier to be able to understand people naturally and not to be like fixated on how to sound like a British person or an American person. So yeah, I mean, moving for an international English in general is going to make student lives and teacher lives much, much more easier.
Okay.
Another challenge that teachers face when they are teaching listening inside the classroom is the fact that they find that their students try to understand every single word that they hear, and they end up not really understanding the whole thing. So that's one of the challenges that teachers face. How can I allow my students or direct my students to start and listen for like the general idea and not concentrate on specific words? So again, that's another challenge that teachers face.
Yeah, this is that kind of balance between top down and bottom up, right?
Exactly.
So, a lot of if you look at a lot of coursebook activities, I think they're very much looking at detail, right? So we also need to do a lot of work around, like you say, getting the meaning, understanding the gist of what they're listening to as well. Mohammed?
Yes. Another point. Thanks, Aala, for your input about listening. And another point for teachers, actually, we need to differentiate between teaching listening and practicing listening. Actually, what our students do usually while they're listening, usually interprets what we teachers prepare our students for. So we need first to set up the context, prepare them for listening really well. As a pre-listening task, we need to provide them with the blocking items. And as you said, we need to draw their attention that they don't need to understand every single word. And they need to do a task while listening, because sometimes teachers wait until the listening is over and start to ask questions. But we cannot provide students with any task, with any activity, while they don't have something to do during this activity. So teachers need to prepare students very well for that. And maybe students need to listen more than once. So you need to prepare 3 activities, maybe, like listening for just specific info or for details. So otherwise, if they're listening for stories, for example, so they need to, have a comprehensible input while they're listening in order to understand and figure out what they're listening to.
Yeah, I think this is really important, making sure that listening is a holistic activity, right? That there's pre-activities, during activities, and post-activities.
Yeah, and some of the challenges that students cannot also control the speed of listening. So they need to know that they need to listen and focus on certain tasks. They need to understand, the connected speech, the intrusive linkers, for example. As you say, Aala, there are different accents, like, if you say, like in British English, sometimes when you say law and order, so where did this R come from, law and order? Or you can say the idea of, or Q&A. So you and me. So they need to understand it's not just one word, so they need to know that there is the way that they see English is not the way that they listen to English.
Good. I've got all of these, and I'm going to start adding them to our Padlet. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
No, thanks.
No, I think what Mohammed said was really important. The fact that he mentioned this speed of the audio script that students are listening to, because sometimes students suffer because maybe it's going too fast or maybe it's too slow, so they are bored. So it's very important to choose appropriate listening audio files to our students, especially if teachers are creating their own content and they are not using a specific course book, because sometimes teachers do that, especially if they have like a conversation class or they have a maybe a summer class with their students. So sometimes they prepare their own content. So it's very important that you make sure, especially with young learners, that the audio is clear and it's slow enough for them to understand. So yeah, that's a very important point, Mohammed. Thank you for bringing that up.
Would you guys advise people to use a flipped classroom for listening to give students more time? Because it seems as though time is a bit of an issue around this. So how could a flipped classroom aid the teacher to improve those listening skills? Do you think that it would?
Yes,
go ahead,
I'll go first. Yeah. You go.
Well, I definitely think that this would work, especially if teachers give students a purpose beforehand and they tell them why they need to listen at home, and then answer the related questions, like give them questions before they start listening and maybe questions after they start listening and questions during. And later on during their class time, they can discuss the difficulties that students face while doing the activity at home. And later on, the teacher could like build around that and tries to so it would definitely work, and it would save a lot of time.
I would absolutely also recommend this, but not to listen to the listening task itself. Maybe they can listen to, or they can watch a video about the topic in general, but in order to figure out if students really understand or memorize what they're listening to. So they need to just, maybe they can practice vocabulary, they can practice a pre-listening task, maybe they can watch a video about the whole topic, but the listening task itself not to be taken home and listened to.
Okay. I guess that feeds into what you said before about purpose, right? Whether or not we're doing the listening, test them on whether they know what it is we're listening to, or whether or not that listening is actually building to something different, whether it's building to a speaking activity or something more natural, perhaps.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we've done a lot of listening. Should we move on to speaking? Let's see if there's any questions here.
Before we move to speaking, Nathan, I see a good point from Aala about listening, because sometimes teachers, disregard listening because it's not coming with the exam, and students, of course, do not pay attention to that, and they don't really care about listening because it's not the test. So sometimes teachers need to be careful. Are we teaching for the test? Here in Saudi, there are listening tests in the final, but some other countries don't have this. Maybe the testing system doesn't include listening or speaking. So that's why the outcomes are really, disappointing about how students are competent in speaking and listening. So good point from Aala as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so we've kind of mentioned speaking a little bit. Let's move from listening to speaking. I mean, they're interrelated skills. I'm not sure it's possible to say something you've never ever heard before. So I don't think we can get away from the interconnected nature of them.
Yes.
But again, in terms of MENA students and speaking, I mean, this is going to be a big one because we've all been there. I've taught here in MENA as well. Getting your students to actually say something is a massive challenge for teachers most of the time. Why do you think that is? What can we do about it? Mohammed, we'll go with you first.
All right, so first we need to understand where our students come from just as much as where they're going to. Arab students have got, don't have the Roman alphabet and don't have, some sounds in English, in Arabic don't exist in English, and sometimes the mother tongue contaminates the pronunciation in English. So this is one of the sub skills in speaking, which is pronunciation. But actually, getting students to speak, because sometimes they're shy to speak. They're afraid of getting feedback from teachers. So we teachers need to be careful with giving feedback to students about their pronunciation, about what they say. Yet speaking is an output, so we need to make sure that there is input and they've got enough information and enough background about the topic that they're going to speak about. So you can't ask students to speak about global warming while they don't know what global warming is, even if it's in their mother tongue. So we need to have, again, a comprehensible input, and we need to have a model. I would recommend that we start, of course, we need to handle and deal with, the issue of fluency and accuracy. So we need to have sort of controlled practice, less controlled practice, and freer practice maybe. So, and, put them in real situations. So that could be a good idea for teachers. And of course, to have students speak more than once in different occasions in the classroom. It's not enough to have them listen, not enough to have them, work in pairs or in groups. So we need to vary the patterns of interaction in the classroom.
Yep, good. Okay, so you touched on quite a few things there. You touched on shyness. So
Yes.
what motivates them to speak in the first place? And that's a big area, I think, developing confidence. Modeling, definitely. Again, using that listening that we've been doing as a model, and then building on that as a teacher. Fluency or accuracy, and this need for real situations. Fluency or accuracy is a big one. Aala, do you want to say anything? I know that there's actually a webinar on fluency or accuracy that's just been done, so people might want to look that up. They go to the Macmillan English website and type in fluency or accuracy. There's a whole hour that's been done on that. So I don't think we can touch that much on it. But Aala, do you have anything else you want to add to this around speaking skills and challenges?
Yeah, I would say that one of the challenges that our students face and our teacher face as well is the fact that students are intimidated by their peers. So this is one of the reasons why they do not speak inside the classroom. And sometimes it's just they do not have enough interest in the topic that the speaking lesson is about. So choosing an age-appropriate topic, an interesting topic, is really important to encourage the students to speak. And sometimes this is what I used to do with my classes, but I used to teach adults. So sometimes I would use controversial topics just to get people to talk. So that's acceptable as well, as long as the topic is interesting. And I think the last challenge that we might have is the fact that sometimes our students have previous bad experiences when they speak inside the classroom. So it's very important that teachers assure the students and create a very safe environment where students are free to use the language as they see fit. And as Mohammed said, feedback needs to be, teachers need to be very smart with feedback. So again, I need to have an aim of the speaking activity I do with my students. So is the aim here to focus on accuracy or fluency? Because my feedback will be different depending on the aim of the activity itself. And again, because time is an issue, this is one of the things that teachers always say to us, that we do not have enough time to involve everyone inside the classroom and let them speak. So maybe you can ask students to work in groups. Maybe you can ask them to do a presentation. You do not need to ask every and each student to say something. Maybe they can collaborate together. And this way, you will make sure that everyone is contributing to the speaking activity at hand.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And while giving the speaking task, thanks Aala for that. And the good point about the teacher's role, again, while students are speaking, either in pairs or in groups, is to monitor, not just to sit in the classroom, either it's online or face-to-face. So they need to move around, monitor, write down their notes, and later on in the feedback section, so they can highlight and praise good examples. For example, I have heard, thanks for your speaking, and I've heard a lot of good examples. I've heard so and so, but be careful. There are a few things that you need to be careful with. For example, don't say he have, say he has. Don't say he do, he does, for example. So we need to not to personalize or to assign the mistake, but we first we need to highlight the good example, praise it, and later on we need to deal with these mistakes, but not to specify the mistake to a certain student.
Yeah, okay. So I've got building confidence is key. Yeah, I mean, I would add to that as well. Perhaps what you were saying, Aala, yeah, personalizing, certainly for young learners, giving them as many opportunities to personalize what it is they're speaking or saying. So, you know, whether it's talking about a toy or talking about a personalized photograph is more powerful or more meaningful than, you know, just describing a picture that's in the course book. So think of and look for opportunities, I think, for ways to get them to speak in some way that's more meaningful. I mean, let's face it, we tend to say things when it has a purpose. So we need to give them that purpose, I think, through personalization, through meaningful activities. Whether that's, like you said, whole class. I mean, to look at the question that's in the chat box, how to get students speaking in large classes, is to perhaps break that down into smaller groups, and have them perhaps presenting to not everybody. You know, then we take that shyness into account. Okay, they might not want to get up and speak in front of 40 students. Certainly if they are teens or young adults, that's a nerve-wracking thing to do, to get up and do a 60-second presentation in English. You know, even for, you know, I know a lot of native speakers, you know, at university that would freak out at the idea of having to get up and speak for 2 minutes on a topic in their first language. So, you know, doing that in your second language is very nerving, I think, for students. So yeah, break them down, build up. So, you know, can they say it as an individual? Can they interact with a pair? Can they then move to a 3? Can they then do that in a small group? So think about how you build that confidence as the group size gets larger, I think is important around that. Excellent. Anything else you guys want to add around speaking? I would add one other thing around speaking. No, I won't. I forgot what it was because I've just said what I just said. It'll come back to me. Sure.
I would say,
but go on, Aala, what is it?
So I would say that sometimes I encourage teachers to ask students to videotape themselves giving a presentation. This is one of the things that will build confidence, help students build confidence, and maybe will save teachers some class time. So if students can submit their recordings before the session, maybe the teacher can watch the videos and then give students feedback, and this will work for classes with where students are really shy, and step by step they can come and face like their peers and give a proper presentation. So and again, the teachers will have enough time to give students pointers, whether they are working in groups or on their own. So yeah, try as much as possible to ask your students to record themselves while giving a presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what I was going to say before was around projects, actually. So yeah, speaking is a nice end to a project. And also they've done something, like I said, it's personal. They can bring it to class and they feel more empowered, I think, to say something around it, and they might not have the words. So, and I think another good thing about projects, and if you look at some of the things like Global Stage with projects or Give Me 5, is it gives them more time. I think we can fall into a trap as teachers of expecting them to say something when it is we want them to say. So we will launch something on them and expect them to be able to respond. And we don't always give them enough time to process. Okay, what is it I need to say? Yeah, what's the content? What's the structure? these kind of, putting all that together and then getting it out. And I think that's where the confidence can fall down if we put that pressure on them too much. Okay, good. So we've done speaking and listening as I think we've covered quite a lot, 12:30. So let's move on to the slightly more difficult area, reading and writing.
Yes.
Students in MENA, reading, problem or not problem? Not a problem. I can't speak.
Definitely
Very
a problem.
problematic.
Big problem. So,
But let Mohammed start on this one.
yeah. It's interesting. I've taught in different parts of the world, and it's interesting to see the way people view reading here in MENA.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm really interested to know your takes on this.
Actually, reading is one of the problematic topics because we don't see what's happening inside the brain. Because it's not a passive skill, it's actually an internal skill that we teachers don't see what's happening inside the brain of our students unless we give them a task to do to check their understanding. And that's why we recommend usually teachers to use comprehension questions all the way through in order to figure out if students are understanding what they're reading or no. Reading as an input actually also needs a good preparation from teachers. It's a receptive skill similar to listening, but students can't control the text, can't see it, unlike listening. So teachers need also to set up the context very carefully. They need to motivate students, elicit, and activate their schemata about the topic that they're going to read. They need to, of course, see what students really know about the text. Later on, they can provide like a pre-teach vocabulary task, and of course, the 3 stages of reading, either reading for just details, specific info, and of course some comprehension questions if they're teaching storytelling. So because reading has got different types as well, because if you're teaching stories, it's different from teaching other texts. You're teaching young learners sometimes to read aloud in order to master pronunciation, vocal punctuation, intonation, etc. So we need to figure out what type of reading are we providing our students in order to prepare the activities to help our students master that skill.
Yeah, okay, great. I do have a question for you, Mohammed, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm a teacher. I go into the class. I open up page 54. This session is going to be a reading session. Should my students be able to read all of the text that's on the page?
Of course, they don't need to read the whole text. If you look at exams such as IELTS, you can see that students need to answer questions about text, not read text that have got between 2,700 to 2,900 words. So, of course, if they're going to read one text in 60 minutes, they will not do anything with the task. But students need to understand. They don't need to figure out and understand every single word. Yet there is a percentage of understanding this text, maybe up to 80. It's been controversial about how much of the text students need to understand, 70 to 80, 80 to 90. But what can help teachers know that students really understand the text is what they do in the task, all the way through. Yeah. So my answer is no. We don't need to have our students read the whole text from the beginning to the end.
Okay, because that feeds into the question that's in the chat box.
Yes.
So should young children read, and when should they read silently? So I'll put this to Aala, give her an opportunity to say something. But if they're not expected to read everything, do we need them to read aloud? And there's something that Mohammed said around pronunciation. So are we mixing skills? Are we doing speaking and reading at the same time?
Yeah.
And is that making things confusing for our students? So I've given you a lot, Aala, sorry.
Yeah, that's a lot to answer. Well, I would say that in classes that I've attended in Egypt, I've noticed that a lot of teachers ask students to read aloud as like a group. but they do not have a purpose. Like, they do not do it because they want to work on their students' pronunciation or modulation, for that matter. They do it because they want to give students like the opportunity to speak and to read a text. But the thing is, I always ask teachers, now, if you're asking the student to read aloud, they think that they understand what they are reading. And they always say, no, they don't. So when it's time for them to answer comprehension-related questions, students struggle to answer these questions because they've been focused on like sounding, pronouncing the words correctly and making sure that everything is understood, and they fail to realize that they are reading so that they can answer questions. So I would actually say that teachers should go with the reading aloud technique if this is a drama class. If they are teaching drama and they want students to maybe act out a role. Other than that, I wouldn't really encourage teachers to let students read aloud inside the classroom. There must be a very strong purpose. Exactly. And again, I wouldn't really encourage them to let students read aloud so that they can work on pronunciation, because they will have other opportunities for that. So it's very important to let the students focus on the reading text, understanding if we have different genres and what is the topic about, and maybe ask students to guess or predict what will happen next, and work on their critical literacy skills, because there are more important skills that come with reading than just working on pronunciation. So I hope that answers the question in the chat box.
I think it answered it. I mean, for me, I would also similarly discourage students from reading, from having students read individually out loud in class. Partly because, I mean, I've seen a few videos. If you go online, you go to YouTube videos, students reading out loud, you can see it actually. It's not necessarily for me about the student who's reading. It's about the other 39 students
who are listening.
Swinging, when they're not listening, they're swinging their legs.
They're waiting.
They're waiting. And again, if we're thinking about the utilization of time, teachers don't have time. I think it's not a very productive use of time. I think if you're going to if you set up a particular activity and have all of your students doing it individually, in groups, whatever, and then if you can make time for yourself to take individual students aside and have them read to you out loud. You think about the way, I think about the way I learned to read in my first language. Teachers would do that, right? You would have reading to the teacher time or reading to the teaching assistant. Or we would even have, and I would definitely encourage parents or guardians to get involved. Come in for half an hour a week and sit with different children and have them read to you. That's a really nice way of students reading out loud, but on a more intimate, personal level, rather than just kind of reading out to the class. I think that's really important. Definitely, I agree with what you said. It should be about purpose, reading, having a real purpose. But what it is you're reading, and comprehension, I think, should be a key focus of that, definitely.
Yeah, again, I also want to add that with...
Yes, Aala.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
I mean, all right. So imagine that you're asking a student to read aloud in the classroom, and later on you're going to ask some comprehension questions to this student. Actually, the effort that he made in order to, produce the sounds and to read aloud and to be careful not to make any mistake, will block him or her from understanding what they're reading. They're just reading out loud, but they're not understanding what they're reading. So this is the good point about reading aloud, as Aala said, it's for teaching drama or literature or storytelling. There is a good handbook. It's called Read Aloud Handbook for Geometry Lease, about reading aloud, how to start reading aloud to your children or to very young learners, but without, of course, asking them to read aloud. Or maybe later on, as a teacher, I read to them and ask students later on to read. But again, it's something very specific to drama, not to any text.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there is really important. So yes, reading out loud to the class can be a good thing if it's something that perhaps they've produced themselves. Yes. So again, if we're talking about a project, they may have written something, they might want to read that speech, or they might want to read that story. They may have written a story themselves and want to read it. And I think that's absolutely fine. But like you said, it's got purpose. It's not just, there are 5 pieces of reading on the page, and Mohammed's going to do one, and Aala's going to do one, and Nathan's going to do one. Moving away from that model, I think. Yeah. Okay, we do have a question actually in the chat box. How would the teacher know if the child could pronounce the words if they did not allow them to read out again? What if the teacher's about to satisfied with the reading, later explains the reading to them and makes them read it again? I think that this needs to be broken into 2 areas, right? So you can focus on pronunciation through speaking activities rather than reading activities. So figuring out, getting them talking and getting them saying something, and then working on their pronunciation as part of speaking rather than reading. And the other side is about how much reading they do, who's doing it to them. I mean, my top tip, I think, for reading is for teachers to read as much as possible to their students. Just keep reading to them every day, all the time. The students who do better in school are the ones who are exposed to as much reading as possible. And building that love of reading and then transferring it to them. So as they learn to read, they want to read more themselves. Yeah. So again, as much exposure as possible. Those are the students that tend to do better in English. So. You guys want to add anything else?
Yes, Nathan, another point about that. Also, teachers, in order to make sure that students master the pronunciation, or maybe the meaning, or master vocabulary, actually, they need to recycle that vocabulary. So it's not enough to provide our students with the vocabulary items only once, and the pronunciation only once as well. So we need to have, for example, gap filling activity. Maybe we can give them some chunks to practice, and also maybe they need to write to show us that they also master spelling. And later on, the same target vocabulary can be used in speaking. So it's not enough just to present vocabulary and we assume that students have mastered it. Of course, they've got this spongy and fish memory that they easily understand, easily remember, and easily forget. So we need to be careful with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at a lot of research, like more up-to-date research, I think that they say that vocabulary and grammar, we learn very little of it explicitly. Yeah, it needs to just be reinforced and recycled through listening and reading and now viewing over and over and over again.
Yes.
Yes, they might remember it throughout the duration of a lesson. You present it, vocabulary, they practice it throughout the lesson. Yes, they might produce it in that lesson, but in a week's time, and I could do this with you now, I could do it in, I could just pick a language off of Google Translate and do this with you, and you probably remember some of the words. But in a year's time, if you're expected to produce that, you probably haven't actually internalized it, and that's what you're talking about, right, Mohammed? Okay, good. So, because we're running out of time, writing, yes. The wonderful skill of writing, and students in MENA. I think we probably all know some of the classic challenges they face: left to right, right to left. Challenges. That's one. Penmanship. Anyone who's ever marked Arab students' writings will know that it doesn't always stay on the line, and we have all sorts of other. Yeah. So, you guys, any other challenges? Tips for writing? What have you got?
Yes, Aala, go.
Aala, yeah, go for it.
So I think one of the challenges that we face in Egypt is the fact that most of the time teachers give their students a writing task at home, and they do not spend enough time during their class time teaching students how to write. So they go for a product writing approach rather than a process writing approach. And as you said, this is a situation where students feel this is weird, this is hard because it's a different language, and they need to use different techniques when it comes to text organization and punctuation. So it's very important that teachers give students a model that they can follow, and follow a scaffolded approach, and maybe try to do a writing example with the students inside the classroom before they give them a writing task as homework, because there will always be a gap between the time the teachers assign the task and when students receive feedback. There might be like a week between the 2 points in time. So teachers keep giving students writing tasks, and students keep making the same mistakes. So this is why it's very important that we give students enough opportunities to do writing inside the classroom and collaborate with their peers. So this is what I would say one of the challenges that we face, especially in Egypt.
Yeah, I think that's probably the same across the region or across the world, I would have thought. Is this idea that writing is an individualized task, very often, like you say, done at home because it's time consuming, with the teacher then marking that particular piece of work. So I think, yeah, it's expanding our approach to writing a little bit. Does it need to be an individual activity? I think is the first question that I would normally ask people. Mohammed? Itching to...
I believe it can be a group work activity. For example, it can be a shared story. Let's imagine that I'll start. For example, a teacher provides students with the picture to just initiate the first sentence, or to figure out that they're going to write about a story, and then I generate the first sentence, then I pass it to you and you build on it, and as a whole class we can come up with a whole story. So this can be a group activity if it's like writing a full story, so from different imaginations. Yet it needs a lot of, and of course this will be done orally, and later on it's going to be written down. Also, it can be written down in groups, but yet the challenges are really difficult for teachers, of course, to figure out. So we need to analyze what errors and what challenges our students encounter while they're writing. Of course, one of the as a teacher, one of the challenges that I have faced with my students, and I think every teacher across the MENA can say that our students have got this phonetic spelling. Like if you say, and they do not, of course, recognize the pa and ba, so they also, when they write P or B, so they mix them up. Like if you say the word people, look at the word people, based on research, one of the most misspelled words, like P-E-P-O-L. So because of this phonetic spelling, yet writing needs to be well prepared because it's an output, likewise speaking. And also, once we prepare our students for this writing with the ideas, with the vocabulary, of course, we need to prepare them also. Maybe you can provide a model if our students are really beginners. Maybe we need to have a process, like let them generate ideas. Later on, they write their initial draft. They go to the second draft. Later on, they move to publishing. Maybe they review, and later on they publish their writing. So we need to be careful, as you said, and thanks a lot for what you said as well, because teachers find it one of their challenges, and they don't sometimes we don't like to go out of our comfort zone, so we give it to students. They do it at home with their parents, and they come or with teachers at home, and come to school with a fancy piece of writing, but it's not theirs. So we need to create a routine. Actually, this needs to be routinized. It's not just once per week or twice. Maybe we need to do it every day, every other day. So we need to lay foundation for literacy first. And of course, whenever teachers come to correct the piece of writing, they need to look at it not just in terms of spelling, grammar, punctuation. They need to look at also the other stuff like cohesion, coherence, and the writing style itself.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying about process. I mean, writing is a long process, let's face it. So yeah, I mean, I think we really need to make sure we go right back to the basic. So the introduction of the topic and the ideas at the very beginning sets a really strong foundation for everything that's going to come afterwards. So yeah, if you're going to be able to brainstorm, you need to know something about the topic in the first place. Would you allow them to use L1 to brainstorm? Is that acceptable to generate ideas? Yeah.
Depending on the level. If they're absolute beginners, so let's see if they do understand the topic, and later on maybe ask them to move to the target language. I'm measuring that to myself when I learned other languages, other than English. So I've been faced with that. It was generating ideas either in Arabic or in English, and later on to write that down.
Yeah.
Or maybe ask the teacher, how can I write the full formula of that. So as a beginner, and later on, of course, we need to develop that. But teachers, what I recommend teachers to do actually is to keep a portfolio of every student and have a copy of their writings. And also they need to analyze their errors. Maybe there are students who still need some assistance in spelling. Others need to have more focus on maybe word selection or maybe punctuation. So of course, the challenges are different also for our students. They're not all the same. There is individual variation in this.
Okay. So the question here is, what is the first thing I should evaluate in a writing task? I mean, that's a very difficult question. I guess it sounds purpose, right? What was the purpose of the writing task in the first place?
Yes.
And what is it you want that individual student to focus on? So if you are, for that week, focusing on one group of students around spelling, maybe that's what you could be giving them tasks to improve, and that's what you would be evaluating. I think it's around purpose, rather than just kind of evaluating everything. Trying to move away from that, here's your piece of writing, and there's just red pen all over it with, I think students don't really get a lot of benefit from that. So we've also got another one, the easiest way to make, I've just missed one, but I'm going to come back to that. I want to know the easiest way to make a grade 1 student learn to write in better font and from left to right. I don't know if you guys have got anything else to add for this. I would say that, I mean, it's practice, right? They just need structured support. And it just needs, again, it needs to be repetitive. They need to just go over it and over it. Certainly in KG or grade 1, if they haven't done KG, using those worksheets, doing penmanship. Again, inviting parents into that process. More time, doing that at home gives you more scope to do more writing activities in class.
Yeah. I think also maybe we can because of the directionality as well is one of the differences between Arabic and English. So again, we need to understand the background of our students. One of the good things that sometimes we can provide students with a task, which is a task just to understand how language works. And we can give them a book and ask them usually to open it from left, of course, because if it's an Arabic book, they are going to open it from right to left. So firstly, we need to give them this book and ask them usually to open it from left in order to see the first page. And of course, their notebook as well, they need to open it and use it from left to right in order just to have them figure out the concept of the difference in terms of language.
I brought this the other day.
About practice.
Sorry.
Yeah,
definitely practice. I brought this up the other day in a session that I did around one of the reasons why I really like the Mimi's Wheel series is that it's ring bound. So it opens front facing forward. So you don't have this, is there a left side of the page and a right side of the page? It just gives students more freedom, I think. But we do need to give them more time and take into account the fact that this is a particular challenge for them. They need support and time to build those skills. Once they've got those skills and they've built that foundation, then we can start to do more with it, I think. Okay, there was a really difficult question. I'm not sure any of us are going to really know the answer to this one. What's the best way to assist with dysgraphia students? So I guess we're moving into kind of special educational needs here.
Yes.
You guys have anything you'd like to say?
I would say occupational therapy. like this student needs to do a lot of occupational therapy and have like a specialist help them strengthen their fine motor skills. But treatment will differ from one child to the other. So there is no one size fits all solution. So that student needs to work with a specialist in that area. As a teacher, you can provide the student with as many worksheets as possible to work on their fine motor skills, but you need to have a coordination with their therapist and their parents so that you know what treatment you should follow inside the classroom and what type of exercises that you can give and activities you can give to that specific student until they have this problem under control.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we don't know the teacher and we don't know the student. So, I mean, I definitely agree, but I think that there's probably a lot of areas in the Middle East and North Africa where occupational therapists probably don't even exist. So
yeah,
it's very difficult. I mean, like I don't know how old the student is. I don't know what level the student is. I mean, I think that any intervention needs to be individualized, like you said. It needs to be very supportive. There are things that can assist. Again, I brought this up in the inclusion session. Even if it's like pencil grips, to help hold a pencil. What are they holding? What's the size of the pencil? Is it a pen or a big one or a small one? All these things can make a difference. And then just lots of support, one-to-one support. I think these kinds of students really need. And I know that's very difficult. It's easy for us to say, give them one-to-one support. But certainly drawing in networks. Is there any support in that particular country that the student is in that can help them? Is there a support within the school network, within the family network? As much as possible, can somebody support them with that particular development of that skill? And if not, can we focus on something else? Maybe we can develop their communication skills in the meantime until they get older and move to a city or something, and then they maybe can get some intervention at that particular time. And that's the reality for lots of people. 1 in 10 people are dyslexic, and they live with that. They just adapt until they get to a point where they can access some kind of support, and they can learn other stuff in the meantime. So focus on their skill, on their strengths, rather than just trying to kind of force them through their weaknesses. Yeah, definitely give them more time. I would agree. Anything else you guys want to add in terms of writing? We've got 3 minutes left, so we're going to have to kind of wrap this up. I think it went really fast.
Thanks, Nathan.
Someone just.
Do you guys want to summarize what we can, Grace? I'll put all of this stuff together. I was talking so much I didn't actually get to fill in the Padlet, but I will fill in the Padlet because I've made notes. And I will add some stuff around a particular question to that Padlet. Or you can come around 5 o'clock today and we'll start with this question maybe. But I'll make sure you answer that one, Grace. But do you guys want to just give a 1-minute summary around the 4 skills? Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I would say that we need to integrate the 4 skills together instead of working on each skill as a separate skill. So integration is very, very important, and giving or allowing enough time to focus on like the sub skills would be, again, a very smart move, because everything kind of builds up to like a bigger picture. And you always need to have purpose with any skill that you're teaching. Your purpose will make life easier, and feedback. So purpose, feedback. That's the key words that I would share with you.
Yep. Mohammed, anything to add?
And the other thing, Nathan, is that all language skills feed into each other. And we need to understand our students very well. Once we know our students' motivation and background and their needs, so we teachers can pedagogicalize any activity we want to present, or any skill we want our students to master. So there are a lot of resources for teachers, either online or in print books, but actually what we sometimes theorize practice, and sometimes we practice theory. So we need to make sure that we understand our students very well, and we build a good rapport with them. because they don't care how much we know until they know how much we care about them.
Oh, that's a meme, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But I will actually, yeah, 99% of teaching relationship.
Yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I would definitely say both. I would agree with everything that you've said. I think strategies are key, teaching them strategies so that they can become independent, skills-based learners themselves, I think is really key. Confidence, I think, was at the heart of a lot of what we talked about, building their confidence through relationships so that they feel empowered to actually use the language in a way that's meaningful for them, I think is also really important. You know, and the more independent they become, the faster they develop. I think that's a reality as well. And the more involved that they become. I think it's also, yeah, integrated, like you said, but also that the rate of development in each skill doesn't always progress at the same pace. So take that into account and make sure everything has got purpose behind each of the activities that you do. We didn't touch on viewing at all, which is a shame. I've just realized, oh my God, we skipped over viewing. But viewing in terms of a skill, there is a blog article on the One Stop English site. So you could go there and read up a little bit about it. It's very similar in terms of the listening and the reading. You know, make sure it's got structure, pre-viewing, during viewing, and post-viewing activities. But it's just recognizing that the medium of communication for our students now has changed a lot. So you go back to 1980 when I was at school, a long time ago, almost black and white for poor Aala. You know, it was print. It was print books, and that's, you know, and speaking. That was the way we learned. But now students, you know, there's interpretations within images. So take that into account. How can we build a variety of exposure and get them to talk about it? Critical thinking comes into images a lot. So if you look at global stage, you know, a lot of textbook now starts with an image, nothing else on the page, just an image. You know, what do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Building those communicative skills along the way. I think we answered pretty much most of the questions. Franco, you are most welcome. I hope we answered in a good way. I will include the answer to that. Maybe if I can find some more things, I will include it onto the Padlet as well. And you guys will get in the next, I'd say 3 or 4 days, a certificate and the results of my notes. Thank you both.
There's a question, Nathan. I believe if we've got time to answer the question about spelling.
You go for it. If you want to go for it, then I've got a couple of minutes.
For grade 1 and 2 students, how to master spelling. Actually, if you provide them with a dictation activity, so of course you need to recognize what particular issues your students are encountering while spelling. Do they, you know, have issues with clusters, for example? So you need to work in that. Digraphs, maybe. If they are one of the most common words that students misspell, so you need to also recycle this in the classroom. It's not just for spelling. This could be used also to be, they can be exposed to the correct spelling all the way through, if it's reading or writing. And later on, if you ask them to write that in a piece of writing, so you can evaluate it. Yet, if it's only for dictation, so you can provide them with the word, they can look, and then they can cover, they can write, they can check. So this is for dictation. Activities can be very versatile for them. So they look at the word, they cover it, they write it, they check it, and then if it's still incorrect, they can correct it later on.
Excellent, perfect. Thank you, Aala, for joining us. I will see you again later today. Mohammed, again, I will also see you.
Thanks,
thank you
Nathan.
both.
Thanks,
and thanks everyone for joining us. And we enjoyed and got some valuable tips from our experts on the panel. And we will hopefully see you again. We have another spring session coming up in the next week or two, so I will send the invitations out for them as well, perhaps with a certificate, so you can register for what we have coming up. That's it from me. Thank you, guys, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.
See you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.
See you, everyone.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.